for those that are fans of Mark My Words, they know that on Wednesdays I do a live radio show. I did a show last week, and it was with a gentleman that is living with PTSD. His name's Paul. And it was such an amazing interview that I wanted to introduce, well, first off, his voice to you. This is a guy that I want to work with. He's a guy that I want to try and get involved in the podcast. He speaks so clearly and eloquently about his diagnosis that he is a voice that needs to be heard. Now, it's not going to become initially an official part of the show. I'd love to get some feedback. What do you think of his story? How do you think he went? I mean, I'll tell you, at the get-go, he does an amazing job. But quite simply because I don't want to put pressure on him. However, this is a man who knows pain. He knows what it's like to go through the depths of mental illness just as much, if not more so. Well, in fact, more so than I've gone through. And as we get to know him, hopefully he'll bring out more of that experience so you'll be able to understand the depth of understanding that he has around the subject of mental illness. But look, I did this interview on the radio. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, unfortunately, you're just going to see a still shot. But for those of us that are listening to this through audio, you won't notice any difference whatsoever, except that there's a couple of my radio tags which I have left in the episode just because why not? So the radio show is on Wednesdays. It's at 11 a.m. It's on 2XX in Canberra. You can go to the 2XX website and download our previous shows. But if they're real good, I feature them on the podcast, which I have done for a couple already. You are going to enjoy this chat. I don't like putting thoughts in my listeners' heads. I don't like to build up expectations. I don't like to tell you what you're going to enjoy and what you're not going to enjoy. But this conversation with Paul is one that is the beginning of a conversation that I think is going to be transformative for a lot of people. So without further ado, let's dive in, and you can check out the show on 2XX from last week. Don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. It always helps us. It takes a second for you to do, and it really helps us out. I'd appreciate it. Without further ado, let's dive in, see what happens. Welcome to Mark My Words. Mark My Words is the story of my journey from a place where I was shattered to where I could live again. Warning. Mental illness education and you is the lived experience stories of people affected by mental illness and may contain descriptions of depression, suicide, addiction, and or abuse. Welcome to another episode of mieNu. I am your Mark. I'll be with you for about another half hour. We have got a guest in today that I am really excited to introduce to you. I'd tell you all about him, but I consider that to be his job. So what I want to do, is I want to ask him the question that I ask every week. All right, mate. So, who are you?
Well, Mark, thanks for having me. I'm Paul. I guess I'm a husband. I'm a father of one. I've got CPTSD, as well as what I've only just recently found out is a differential diagnosis of PTSD as well. So I didn't know you could have those concurrently.
So CPTSD and PTSD.
Yeah.
So what does the C stand for? What is the difference between PTSD and
of course,
CPTSD?
So, CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex is generally it's due to ongoing or multiple traumatic events.
Okay, so not just a one-off event, it's something that may have happened a few times.
That's right.
Or another couple of events that are all traumatic.
Of course, yeah, that's right. But then I had a singular event years and years later that was completely different from everything else that had ever happened before. And it was classed as it's been given its own diagnosis as well. So so I have those two, and then I have traits of OCD as well. So
yep. Now, a lot of people in our modern world, if they have a neat desk, if they like to keep things tidy, they like to say, I'm a little bit OCD.
Right.
When you say you have traits of OCD, you're talking a little bit more than that, yeah?
I am, yeah. Look, it depends on the day. It's not constantly, it's not every day. But I have things like I've got a bit of a movement disorder, and my OCD comes out in forms of like tics or movements.
Gotcha.
So for me, the OCD is I have to blink 7 times. It's like an itch kind of thing.
Okay.
I have to go check the house constantly to make sure that every window is locked or back doors are locked multiple times.
When you say you have to, it's a compulsion. It's not like a voice in your head telling you. How does that manifest for you?
It's in the chest. I feel it in the chest,
right.
And it's definitely, if I don't get that done, something bad is going to happen.
Okay,
you can't convince me otherwise.
Right.
So if my wife, my lovely wife, she goes and checks and says the back door's locked, I'm just like, look, I trust you, but I gotta do it again.
I know that you can lock a door. I have confidence in you,
of
but
course.
It's a compulsion within yourself.
That's right. So yeah, you get those people that say, "Oh, I'm so OCD, my pens are straight." It's quite an uncomfortable feeling. It can be very uncomfortable if you don't get to succeed in doing that action as well.
This might be a real personal question, but what happens if you don't fulfill the compulsion?
It can ruin me. I can be completely broken for the day. It can do me in for the day.
Right.
I could, if I don't succeed, and it could be just, I'm not sure, checking something before my wife goes to work.
Yeah.
And she got away before I got to check. I could take the day off work because I just can't function.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get that done, even though I call her and like, hey, it's all good. Don't worry about it. It's all sorted. It's not for me.
Yeah.
So it can completely ruin me, and I could just be bedridden. I could be catatonic. Yeah.
We talk about the misconceptions with OCD, but I'd love to, as somebody that lives with CPTSD as well, I'd love to talk about some of the misconceptions that people have about PTSD. First off, I think we both feel when we mention it to people and they say, oh, you're ex-military.
That's right, yeah.
And it sounds like an innocent question, but you can see, to my mind, it's like a light goes off in their eyes.
Yeah.
You're a veteran, and they feel like
thanks for your service, yeah.
They're connecting with you, and then all of a sudden you say, well, no, and it's like, oh.
Well, then you don't have it.
Yeah, how could you possibly have PTSD?
That's right, yeah.
You were mentioning off air there was an interesting person, and I don't want to embarrass this person because I don't know their journey, but it's the story of somebody that's claiming to have PTSD. We don't know if they do or they don't. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, it was one of those stories that, people say, oh, I've got a migraine and go home. You don't have a migraine, you've got a headache. It's that kind of thing where it's this gentleman was he's a streamer.
Yep.
He was streaming a video game, Call of Duty. You fight each other. It's a war setting, and he claimed that he got PTSD from the graphic nature of it, and ended up getting benefits. And as part of his therapy, which you'd probably be aware, and some others might be aware, there's something called exposure therapy. And his therapy was to keep playing the game, to expose himself to the game, and so he can get used to it and get over the fact that it happened, all while claiming benefits for it.
And we don't know the guy's situation, so I'm not willing to. But it's weird to me that there's this perception out there that it's almost like PTSD is something that you can catch.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, well, it's going to happen. And it's a confusing thing because there's a veteran in America. He survived the Battle of Kadesh, and he's one of two people that got the American Congressional Medal of Honor. And he talks about PTSD as being something that it is something that everybody goes through. Everybody who goes through trauma will experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress. They won't, however, get the diagnosis because it's transitory. It's a little bit. And while trauma is a fact of life, getting a diagnosis of PTSD is very different. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of them don't like to talk about it either, or go and get that diagnosis. Or it's just diagnosed as depression, anxiety, or all of those kind of things. A lot of the time I've been in thousands of doctors' offices and they haven't even looked at you. And they're like, oh, here you go, just take your happy pills and go away kind of thing.
Yeah.
So no, absolutely.
I was very lucky. I had 2 GPs, which were amazing.
Yep.
A guy that saw me a couple of days after my injury, and I was just like, I don't know what's happening. And he said, look, mate, you've probably got PTSD.
Right.
I'm looking at you and I would diagnose you with PTSD if I could. I can't because I'm not a psychiatrist, but that's what we're going to do now. We're going to send you to a psychiatrist. And just knowing that this guy was willing to look beyond what he saw and was like, here's some pills, let's just...
Yeah.
And the second GP was exactly the same.
Well, I had a similar thing. I was lucky enough to have my GP for about 15 years, and he's been there my son's entire life and everything like that. He's been our family GP, and he's been absolutely fantastic. And he did the same thing. But he sent me to a really good psychiatrist, and unfortunately, that gentleman just chucked lithium at me and said I had bipolar. But I'm always down. I'm never up. I don't have any of the symptoms of bipolar. Except
so you're polar.
I'm polar, yeah. And then that kind of disheartened me, and I didn't want to take the lithium, and without knowing really what to do. And so I just didn't do it. And then because of that. That was one of my first experiences. I just didn't want to go back because I just thought, well, he didn't even look at me. He didn't let me speak. And when I did, he just spoke over me. And this psychiatrist, I had so I had a bipolar diagnosis for years, but I wasn't doing anything about it. And then finally, again, I went back and finally got the diagnosis that I have now.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you walk into a psych's office, psychologist, psychiatrist, when I first started doing it, I thought, these people are trained. They know what they're doing. Never occurred to me that there might be a bad psych. But then you think about any other profession. There's bad garbage men.
Absolutely.
There's bad shopkeepers. There's bad dentists. There's bad everything. We assume that because they've got the plaque on the wall that they're infallible.
Yeah.
And even if they're not, even if they're completely, they're good, you might not connect with them.
Well, I didn't like it because I don't generally share my story. My wife and a few doctors know, and yourself knows a bit, but that's about it. So I didn't like sharing with this gentleman that I had no idea who he was, and he practically had his back turned to me and was just writing down everything.
Right.
And it was just quite a bad experience. And because of that, it was just one of those, I'm not going back.
What was the converse? When did you finally start learning that you could have some faith in psychiatrists?
Well, I actually saw psychology first, and it was after an incident, that incident that caused just the PTSD, and she was lovely. She was absolutely fantastic, but I was holding a lot of stuff back.
Sure.
So I wasn't lying to her, but I wasn't telling her everything. because it was mine. I didn't feel like, and it was quite embarrassing, and there was a lot of, I didn't want to say a lot of stuff. So she unfortunately asked a lot of the really good questions that turned out to be true anyway.
Unfortunately or fortunately?
Unfortunately, I didn't say yes.
Right.
At the time, which I really should have, because I may have got help a lot earlier.
Sure.
Or the help I needed a lot earlier. So she saw right through me, I think, and she was like, "Are you sure this didn't happen?" or things like that. And I was just like, no, all good. And this did, though, and she was like, "Okay, well, look, we'll start treating you as if you have PTSD, but we can't really diagnose it." But I finally started getting, more faith in psychiatry, the psychiatrist, over the last couple of years. Only the last 2 or 3 years, I started seeing a psychiatrist, and I'm about to see a new one, so hopefully that one goes well. That's a new journey.
It's always a crapshoot, isn't it?
That's
it's
right.
You never know what you're going to get.
But this psychiatrist really listened and really asked the good questions and really just let me speak and spoke back, but just... it was eye contact the whole time. Yeah. It wasn't head in a book or at a computer writing down stuff. It wasn't, tapping a pen. It wasn't doing all of this kind of stuff. He was just locked in, and he was absolutely fantastic. And he unfortunately said, drop everything and go to a mental health ward right now. You're really not good. You need to go, kind of thing. And he called ahead and got me in, kind of thing. So, so I was just like, wow, this is serious. That's when I really started taking it more seriously. Yeah. Was because of him, and yeah, so from then it's just kept going. So
we talk about stigma being around, and the best case of stigma I can think of is if you're sending in a job application, if you're applying for a new job, you're never going to put down the fact that you're a suicide survivor.
That's right.
You've got a diagnosis of some kind. You have schizophrenia, whatever. You're never going to write that down because you're clearly not going to get the job. But the stigma that we don't talk about that often is that self-stigma.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. No. I absolutely don't want to do that. But it sounds like you had a lot of that self-stigma. If you admitted to the thought that you had these issues, then you would be less than.
Yeah, I think so. The way I was raised, you weren't allowed to be hurt. I survived a few days with a broken arm and, wasn't taken to the hospital, kind of thing.
Yeah, because just rub some dirt on it, get over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was even more than that. It was, you absolutely can't be hurt. And if you are, I'll hurt you again, kind of thing. I'll
right.
Like, so, if you think that hurts, this will hurt more, kind of thing. So that was the kind of environment. So it was, and it's still there today, where it's just like, no, I can't be sick. So, if I'm sick from work, I can't be sick from work. I have to go in. Doesn't matter how sick I am.
Sure.
I just have to go in. So it's still there. And thankfully, my wife was definitely the catalyst to help me and to, she's looked after me, if I have to, lack of a better word, and push me, or not push me, but help me, seek help and push me a little bit. Yeah.
I was speaking to a good friend of mine a couple of months ago, actually, somebody that I've told stories with about this in schools and workplaces, know quite a lot about them. And there was something in me that just assumed that she had somebody in her life like you have with your wife, like I have with my wife.
Yeah.
It just seemed like she must have had someone.
Right.
I can't imagine how difficult it is for the people that don't have someone
absolutely
like our significant others. And I actually don't use that term lightly. The
more significant others.
More significant others. The person that I'm alive because of.
Every day, I think the same thing. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my wife and son. But every day I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
If they, for some reason, weren't here, I just couldn't imagine it. It's just not. But unfortunately, I do imagine it. It's just one of those intrusive things, those things that happen. So, yeah.
It's one of those interesting things. You bring up a really interesting thought kind of experiment there. I go through it a lot, this challenging of negative thoughts, this idea that my mind could lie to me.
Yeah.
I will see something as being a fact.
Yep.
This happened, and this is what A plus B equals C.
Yeah.
And my wife will just go, no.
Yes. Yeah.
That didn't happen at all. And it took me a long time to get my head around the fact that my mind was a liar.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
It's just one of those things.
It's amazing that and that you can identify that, so that your brain has lied to you, but you're also identifying, but your brain is what's identifying the fact that it lied to it.
and sometimes it's hard to figure out what's right or not.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think my wife comes into it so much. I'm able to say, this happened and this is how I feel about it. Is it okay for me to think this way?
I've started doing that, where I've only just started, I think, challenging my thoughts. My wife will probably tell me later after she listens to this if I'm correct or not. But I feel like I'm more asking her now, like, is this actually happening? Or did that actually happen? Or, was this the case? But I never was like that. It was always like, it's clear cut. This is the case. I'm correct. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, no, that's just simply not the fact, kind of thing. That car was blue. No, it wasn't. It was red. And I was like, nope, I don't believe you. But I've started challenging those own thoughts now, where it's coming in, and I'm actually asking her a bit more of, hey, has this actually happened? So hopefully, if she's listening, she agrees. Yeah.
I always worry when I get off here, am I going to go home and my wife will go, what?
Couch. Yeah.
I never heard this before.
That's right. Yeah.
What are you talking about? Mate, I want to tell you how much I appreciate what we've talked about today, and we are going to take a little bit of a pivot in a minute, because I want to talk about how important it is to get people to reach out.
Absolutely.
Your story is incredible to me because of how long, and I don't want this to sound negative, but you kind of let things lie.
Yeah.
Sort of in this, and again, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but it was kind of this male sort of, we just have to deal with this stuff.
That's right.
Bad things happen, you don't sook about it.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah, no. It's way too long, to the point of my latest therapist or, medical professional I was seeing called it pre-verbal. So that's before you can even walk and talk. They're saying you had, predisposition to all of this kind of stuff. So that's 35 years up until right now. So that's a long time, and I've only really seriously started getting stuff done in the last 5 to 6, 7 years. So don't leave it that long.
So the next question I want to ask is something that people might say or do when it comes to your mental illness. What is something that makes you go,
Look, I really don't, I guess, appreciate or like just the perception, again, going back to that, of if you have PTSD, not just the whole, oh, you're a veteran thing, but that you're automatically violent.
Right.
So that has really annoyed me, as that's one of the first things that's always asked of me. Do you get violent? Do you get explosive anger? Are you, I'm more the opposite, where I kind of go into myself, I kind of shut down and go more quiet than anything. But it's just always a perception that I'm an angry, nasty monster,
Right.
And I really don't appreciate that, always being asked that. as one of the first kind of questions
Yeah.
if I do open up to people. So they just must be, and then they go to my wife in like, you know, caring, like, oh, are you okay? Is he, you know, you know, so it's really awful to think that just because I have that stigma around it is that I'm automatically an explosive or violent person.
Yeah.
Hopefully my wife would say complete opposite. Yeah.
Well, the statistics are that people with mental illness are more likely to hurt themselves than anyone else.
That's right, yeah.
Now, I cannot leave the conversation the way that we have today. I want to just revisit really, really quickly. As a man that kept his PTSD to himself, kept the trauma, kept the symptoms to himself, what is your recommendation to a person that might be in a similar situation to us?
Yeah, look, it's find someone you trust or confide in them. If not, go straight to, you know, ED, emergency. They're absolutely fantastic. They will look after you. Just confide in somebody. Tell somebody something. You don't have to tell them everything straight away.
As you can see, we ran out of time there, so the end of the show got cut off. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Paul, and don't forget, you'll be hearing his voice a lot more on Mark My Words. As always, thanks for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you for listening to Mark My Words. I'd like to thank my producer, Meredith Brosnan, and also Torian, Kevin, and Lorraine. And I can't forget the band Adelaide, who allows us to use their song as our theme.